time it was. So feel free to start.
Yeah,
And thanks for uploading the thing, by the way, Lucas. I didn't even thank you.
you don't need to
But
thank me for that. You do all the work. Guys, welcome back. This is the Followers of the Way. We're joined by Michael in the Garden of Eden and Aaron in his house. It's good, but it's my
In his
voice or
father's
Michael's
house.
voice or your voice. All voices are good.
testing my voice,
Testing Aaron's
testing
voice.
Michael's voice.
Testing.
So, deepest apologies. Last episode messed up the audio through my OBS and I cannot reverse it. I looked it up. Apparently, the technology doesn't exist yet. Good lesson though. Actually, I'll just start recording now also on Zoom to be sure. Thanks, Aaron. I'll start recording on Zoom
Recording
as
in
well.
progress.
Oh, so then I should probably check again or not?
No, it's
Or
okay.
it's
Just
fine.
have a
Okay.
backup. It doesn't change the way it records.
I'm sorry that I'm still eating. But
Aaron
yeah.
is eating his bowl of yogurt, and we read the book of Revelation. Is it Revelation or Revelations? I put Revelation in the title.
Revelation.
Yeah, I thought so. Revelation sounds better to me, but hey, listen, this is a Bible book. It's the culmination, the end of the New Testament. It is epic. It is terrifying. It is dark. It is light. It is confusing. It is specific. It is vague. I don't know much to make of it. Um, yeah, but I've been quite overwhelmed by it, reading it. Then we had the Followers of the Way episode on it that Aaron read and was uploaded on this channel, which gave some historic background. What I was most impressed by was the speak of the executions. I don't know if you guys remember that, but they speak about, I don't know if it's Paul speaking at some point, someone speaking of like, what are the conditions with which you can execute a Christian and stuff like that. And it's really, it starts to make you wonder, what would you do in a situation like that? I don't know. Um, but yeah, as I said
Yeah.
last time, as a
And I also
joke,
think that the text, like, or at least it specifies like these seem to be reluctant um leaders, so, or like
yeah,
reluctant kings. So like just imagine someone who was less reluctant, because it's like, what do I do with them? Yeah, I guess just this one, but not too much, just, etc. Just imagine if someone was a bit more, you know hateful. Yeah.
yeah. Spoke about who's the real author of the book of Revelation, that it likely isn't John. Um, Also, that it wasn't the book that was written last. I think there was some debate about including it or not, if I remember that correctly as well. Um, Whether it's a prediction of the future, whether it's a vision, a dream of some sorts, an imagination, there's still debate on that as Aaron speaks to the wall. And um, Aaron is still eating, but I'd actually appreciate him adding on to everything that I'm saying, because I'm sure that there's a lot more to say.
Mhm.
Finish your bite, sir.
Well, yeah, probably shouldn't be. How's the, like, my wife was asking about the background noise. How's this background
I
noise?
don't hear a thing.
Okay, good. That's the wall I was speaking to. Um, yeah, so I think indeed, like, the authorship is discussed. Um, it's interesting because, like, part of the discussion questions at the end is like, maybe there's still something like a Johannine school, like maybe there's something like similarities between the Gospel of John and the letters of John and this one, that, yeah, speak to something like a Johannine school of authors writing together. So that's a question, but it was probably a different author. Um, it's hard to say. It could have been the same one, but, like, for instance, one thing that is strange about is that at some point he has a vision of the 12 apostles in front of him. So why didn't he just say, like, yeah, and I saw myself too,
Yeah,
like, that would have been a bit more, would have made a bit more sense. But so it seems to be like he's identifying himself as John, and he saw the 12 apostles, including John, which is a different John. Um, the letters are written to, well, you get a bunch of sevens in this, yeah, in the book of Revelation. So it starts off with the letters to seven churches. Then there's the opening of the seven seals on the scroll. Then you have the sounding of the seven horns, seven trumpets. Then you have the seven characters. personages, amongst which are, for instance, the beast and the monster and the dragon. Um, then you have the seven vials, then you have the seven dooms, and eventually you have the seven new things. And the seven churches are all in the province of Asia, which is not the continent Asia, which we know today, but it was a province in the Roman Empire, which is different, which is very interesting because like these are seven of them in the province of Asia. So that testifies to a fast spread of the religion already in the first century, because otherwise you just expect like, yeah, I mean, like in that province there's only one, right? But there are seven of them in that province. So like I think that's pretty interesting. That indeed means there's must be several thousand followers by now, which is interesting. And what's also interesting, we get something like um, a counter perspective to Paul. Like for instance, when we read about Paul, about like, are you allowed to eat food that has been worshipped to other gods? And Paul is like, I mean, it's fine. You know, like it's like we don't really, let's say, think that the law was something temporary through the prophets, and now, you know, the law has been fulfilled. But obviously, if you offend someone with it, then just don't eat it. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, feel free to eat it. Like it's totally okay. And for John, like he's really seems to be more of a Jewish Christian who is like, how dare some people eat food that is has been, you know, like um, used in divine offerings to other gods. So like there's a difference here, and that's one of the claims that he makes to, for instance, some of the churches. So I think that's relevant, something we could talk about. Obviously, he seems to be his main problem is could also be opposite from Paul in the sense of like that Paul is kind of okay with this, you know, like partly assimilating to Roman culture, which is Paul himself too, right? He had Roman citizenship, but he was also Jewish and he became Christian or became a follower of Jesus. Um, but he's really like, how dare you assimilate to this Roman Empire? Like you shouldn't do it. And he really saw Rome as this terrifying new Babylon. And the Emperor Nero, um, who had persecuted Christians, there was this rumor that he was going to come back, you know, like come back from the dead, which is why he's both the seventh head of the dragon, but also the eighth head that is coming back, which is interesting. And that's why his number is 666, because numerically it's the same value of the letters of the name Emperor Nero in Greek. Um, I don't know. Is there much else to add? Well, then there was more persecution under Domitian, which was happening at the time. There's relevance in terms of like astrological influence, stars in scriptures, which was mentioned too. Which I remembered obviously today is also at the start of Matthew, right? That Magi, they see the star. But now you get this sense that the important battles aren't necessarily those that are fought on the battleground, like on Earth, but also those that are fought in heaven, which is why it's relevant to pay attention to the stars. Welcome, GP. Um, and then finally, like there are discussions about okay, what are the patterns? So he's really like a symbolic Peugeot type thinker, probably. So there's several numbers that are relevant, like the number, you know, 1260 days, which is the same as 3.5 years, which suggests something like half a week, and week is fulfillment. So, you know, like often the human number is six, but that's also why Nero is 666. But then the complete fulfillment in the day for God, the cycle for God is seven. So seven is sort of this positive number, and there's this suggestion by Buss that perhaps, you know, it was about 35 years in between the crucifixion of Jesus and the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, which is very apocalyptic. So maybe we're at the halfway point and there will be another 35 years, which is why the 3.5 symbolism is relevant until Jesus will then return. But there could be other reasons for it, I guess. Um, and what should be followed too, that's the final thing that I'll add, is the lamb. Like, so you should notice the progression of the lamb throughout the story, which is the lamb that is slain. So, which is obviously reminiscent of Christ who has been crucified, but nonetheless who survives this death and is also the lion at the same time. He's the lion of Judah, but he's also the lamb. Um, and it's interesting to follow his story arc. And sometimes he even seems to be like a little bit terrifying, like that he has all these horns and all these eyes. So there's more we can talk about there. But eventually the Lamb will uh, reign in this peaceful New Jerusalem. Um, yeah, and then there's a bit of background information on something that Lucas already discussed. Did the mission persecute Christians? Yes, most likely, but perhaps not systematically, but it happened sufficiently. Anyways, yeah, I think that's it. Perhaps we could have like a little round asking what it is we want to talk about before we talk about them, so we get a sense of some of the topics of interest for all of us. Um, Maybe starting at you, Michael, if you have some, whatever comes up or impressions, feel free to share. And then GP and then Lucas, and then I'll see if I have something to add, and I'll continue finishing my yogurt now.
Yeah, okay. I mean, there's probably a lot that I could say, and kind of what was on my mind while I was reading it and today, and also like I think the entire kind of Christian journey. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by a butterfly. Kind of my whole Christian journey, I've been kind of preoccupied with the second coming and what like whether I even believe in it, what it means, like what it means that it's been 2000 years and he hasn't come back, and what to make of that. So I know that's kind of more of a broad topic, and I'm sure we want to talk about things specifically in the book. But that's kind of just like I think that's just kind of the elephant in the room. I feel like for all of us, it's like what we even think of that.
Hi, everyone. You can hear me okay? Beautiful. Um, so I don't have too much in terms of specific topics, maybe sort of broad general things as well, like Michael mentioned. Um, but I was going to sort of touch on, I guess, the question of whether the Book of Revelation is driven by resentment, or to what degree it is, or in what ways it is, um, and sort of positive ways to view it, negative ways to view it, and also what to make of the New Jerusalem as being a a vision of the good life to come. So
Thank you, GP. I would like to talk about perhaps the specificity in many ways I was intrigued by. I was expecting something a lot more, yeah, for lack of a better word, psychedelic. Aaron said that I should put on my ayahuasca glasses, but I found it very hard to do that because, yeah, in many ways it felt like a detailed description of the future or some sort of reality that was to come. And yeah, I was pretty thrown by it. So yeah, I'd like to discuss that, what you guys make of that. Also, just the general darkness of it, the judgment of people, the man, I've been really more and more confronted with how divisive as well the New Testament can be, how it can be read, and um, yeah, yeah, I find it hard to square it with a lot of other things, part of my faith. So leave it at that.
Yeah, I think I also want to discuss all the subject matters that were raised. Um, yeah, like all of them. And I think I should probably add that, well, maybe there are some specific thoughts that I find interesting. So I took some notes reading through the book of Revelation. So maybe we could start there a little bit and go over them. I also am interested in the resentment question. I know there's at least one point also where, oh, wait, oh, was it, did it stop recording and then we'll start recording again? Is that possible? Oh, for some reason something happened to my Zoom, but maybe that was me. Anyways, that I think there's a passage in the genealogy of morals where Nietzsche also very specifically says like, if you want to know about resentment, like especially between the Jews and Rome, just read the Apocalypse of John. That's clearly a case of resentment, and I think there's something to be said for that. I was actually discussing it a little bit with my dad, and he also mentioned like, yeah, just sort of yeah, try to, without making this too political, but try to imagine living in Gaza and relating to, the force that is modern day Israel, for instance, which is again not to make any political claims, but I'm just saying like just that experience of what that must be like. But at the same time, this perhaps, and that's why GP's question is interesting, this call towards some kind of like it's also a development of an ethic that is more self-sacrificial, which can't just be resentful. So it can't just hate the Roman Empire. It must have a different solution than simply wanting to destroy the Roman Empire and become sort of a new empire. That's definitely something I want to discuss. Um, and I think this really relates. Like I also got a little bit into Jung's reading of the Book of Revelation, and he similarly really thinks that this kind of a necessary story arc, like he believes them to be the same author as the Gospel of John. I think it's a little bit unsure whether that's the case, but he says like naturally that's so because if you look at the Gospel of John, it's all about Jesus, the Logos, God is love. So obviously this is such a positive vision of God that what was repressed was this more darker sort of aspect of God. So it had to come back. And I'm just not sure about that reading, but I'd like to discuss it if we could. Um, yeah, and then I think there were some interesting discussion questions which we could also think about, which is like, you know, our own crises, future crises such as climate change or viruses, nuclear disasters, which were mentioned in the discussion questions. Um, the extent to which this is a story, and what kind of story it is then. Um, and let me think, and also how to read it. Like so I was listening to Bioproject podcast on this, and they said like, yeah, so you can like they have this quadrant where in the middle of the quadrant is the present focus, and then on top is like the past focus, and then on the bottom is the future focus, and then on the left you get this text as a code where you have to decode the text, like what does it mean, what is it referring to, um, and then you have the text more as a lens, which is more thinking symbolically and analogically. And the people do all of those things, and sometimes, more of them at the same time. So, for instance, you could be a preterist where you think about, okay, what is it referring to in the past? And then you think like, oh yeah, well, 666 refers to Nero and it refers to Rome. Or you could be like a futurist where it's like, what is it referring to? Well, it's referring to AI and what's coming now, and then you have to say like, that's definitely what it's referring to. Or you could think of it more in that indeed symbolically. Oh, these are perennial patterns, they keep repeating, so they're relevant then and relevant now, and therefore also relevant in the present, but also relevant in the future. So there's all these different uses of them, and I'm curious if which is the most legitimate, for instance. Yeah, so those are some of my questions. How should we start? Should we start just getting through I don't know, like through the book itself? Like Lucas, what do you suggest?
That's a good suggestion. You can go through it. Where does it start? Where does it go?
Is there something we need to, for instance, say about the seven churches? Is there something that stood out to someone or the start at all? Um, Anything that was noticeable there? These are like the first few chapters. I think yeah, about chapter 1 until 4-ish, something like that, or 1 until 3, I think. So I'm not sure if it's relevant. Like we already sort of discussed it. There should be several things there, and I already mentioned some of the things in the introduction, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Yeah, so maybe I should leave that there. It was related to seven gold lampstands. I think that's interesting. That's this vision. That's also is it from like Zechariah, something like that? I'm not sure. It's nice that we know some of the churches, like the church in Ephesus or
Yeah.
Laodicea at
Call
this
back
point. Callback, yeah, exactly. So I think that's pretty interesting.
to my boys in Ephesus.
Yeah, and I think it's just interesting to see this really opposite perspective of like John compared to Paul. He's like, okay, yeah, like it's obviously wrong that some of these Jews are assimilating, whereas Paul is really more in favor of assimilating. So I think that's just like an interesting reflection of the development of Christianity in that first century. And then add to that, like, that really like that he said that some who call themselves Jews but really belong to the synagogue of Satan, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Which
pretty
is just
dark.
like, yeah, really interesting. But that's because he thinks of himself as a better Jew. So it's not like he hates Jews in general, but he's like, yeah, like you're not a good Jew, and that's interesting. Um, yeah. So then obviously like the famous vision of the four animals, one like a lion, one like a calf, one like a man, one like an eagle in flight,
Yeah.
and then you have the 24 elders on the 24 thrones. You
So
know,
what are all these numbers? What are all these numbers about?
what are these numbers about? I don't know. 24 is 2 times 12. 24 is the hours in the day. Um, I don't know if it's specifically 12 is obviously like extremely relevant.
Yeah,
Uh,
12 tribes.
yeah, yeah, it's a complete year. Do you have any intuitions on this, Michael or GP?
Yeah, I just thought of 12, the significance of 12. Um, I'm not aware of 24 having its own significance, but
Yeah.
I also am a noob, so I don't know.
We're a bunch of noobs, guys.
And GP?
No, I don't have anything to add there.
Man, I wish it
Yeah.
was just all part of the sacred geometry, Graham Hancock narrative. It's so fun.
Well, but if you 1 second.
You're, yeah, you're drinking from a beer glass. People start talking trash about my milk.
Yeah, but it's water.
Yeah, okay.
If you read Jung, you'll get there a bit more. Like he really says, like, oh,
Yeah.
it's so interesting. You see all the pagan influences too in John.
Ah, yeah, okay.
But like just to already like sort of weave in some of the points you wanted to discuss, both of you. For instance, this being like, is this like a psychedelic trip or not? And I remember immediately that like it's so filled with it makes constant references to the Hebrew scriptures, like to the prophets and all the visions there, that it seems like it's too well thought out that it could just be this spontaneous
Yeah.
idea. At the same time, you could also argue that, well, that was his symbolic language. So, I think Graham Hancock said even at some point that it's like, well, yeah, people used to see fairies, but now they see aliens, when they have the DMT trips,
Yeah.
which is interesting. So it's like, so it adjusts to sort of the new symbolic form. So it that makes sense. But nonetheless, it seems most likely to me that he had this vision, this mystical vision, which he then pondered over and was like, what does this mean? And then sort of put this into this form with all the sevens, etc. And like so it is more structured than the average psychedelic mystical vision. That's at least my sense. But what do others think?
I mean, I think it's a good question. Like, it was a question that was occurring to me as I read, which was, did someone just think this up, so to speak, or did someone have a mystical experience on which this is based on?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I'm thinking of like, Dante's Divine Comedy, right? Like, I think a few people believe that he actually had a vision, but most people just think that he just invented it and wrote it as a poet, which seems the most plausible explanation, right? And yet he writes it as though he's experienced it, and even says, like, this is true, and like you wouldn't believe me, but I have to tell the story and things like that. But it's all presumably part of the kind of fiction in a way. And so, I think the highly structured nature of this and all the numbers and everything would suggest that it's, like you say, Aaron, maybe at least structured after having that experience, but also could also just be thought up, or maybe it is just a full-blown vision. I mean, if we're not talking about a psychedelic experience, but we're talking about a mystical experience, and I don't think the two are necessarily identical, then who knows what's possible there.
Yeah, it definitely sounded prophetic. I mean, like an outpouring of some sorts. That's why I was very grabbed by it. But then at the same time, like GP says, it does feel in some ways like thought up. And then I'm wondering how people viewed it at the time, because it made it into the New Testament for a reason. So how did that happen, and why? What's the reason?
It took on that point, it took a long time to get into the New Testament. So I think it was the last book to be officially recognized. I think it took a few centuries, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
But maybe Aaron knows more about that. I don't know.
My boy.
Yeah, I just had to get some water.
Nice.
But yeah, I actually thought so. I heard that too. Like I thought I even heard like third, fourth, fifth, sixth century, like really late.
Right.
I'm not sure, but I really thought it was very late. But that's not because it wasn't around. It's because it was like so debated. Like, can we add this, like to it? Like, so it was familiar, which I find interesting and like it makes sense. At the same time, like there's also something not entirely new about it. Like there's so many of these apocalyptic texts in the Old Testament. This one is different, but it's not so different that it's like, whoa, I've never heard anything like this before. Like so many of the visions are similar to those, or identical even, some of them. So at the same time, I'm also like kind of sympathetic to it, and then I'm like, oh, this probably just made sense in the tradition. Um, and so one, like I'm not sure if you listened to those podcasts that I sent you, GP, but for instance, like one comparison that I heard there, which was relevant, was kind of like if you now if we now have like a science fiction novel, but you would show it to someone like from the like just like a medieval peasant, like they would be like, what the hell is this? Like they would have no frame of reference for any of it. Whereas if we start reading one, we're like, yeah, it makes sense, like we have science fiction as a genre, and there is certain, conventions in there. And I think that's really how you must understand this too. So it's very strange to us. Or I think like the example that was specifically given in that context was showing presidential candidates, like showing them to be a donkey, for instance, and the other one to be a pig. And then like for us, like the symbolism makes sense, but perhaps it doesn't make sense to every culture every now and then. So it's just like, wait, is your president a pig? Or is it like, is it like
That's a good
so
point.
so and I think you need to keep that in mind when you read all this. You're just like, this is just so strange, but like to them, like these are maybe common references. And I try to also get a sense of what maybe David Bentley Hart, because I've been reading his translation, what he thought about it, and he is just like, well, I mean, like on the face of it, like the general picture is easy to understand. Like it's obviously a narrative about Rome, but some of these symbolisms, they're extremely difficult. So he says like he thinks it's impossible to get to the original meaning of it, essentially.
Well,
Um,
it's probably a good
but
take.
but then at the same time, like there's videos by Jonathan Peugeot where he does a very impressive job of like talking about the symbolism of 666, talking about the symbolism of the beast, which speaks to the perennial patterns in these, and that perhaps it is possible. So,
Yeah. Well, let's compare it to an ancient Egyptian text. So I used to read old Egyptian texts in class, and then you have just references where you're like, "There's no way." Talking about a specific scepter. Actually, a scepter came in as well in the Revelation. But talking about a scepter and all these weird references, and you're completely at a loss. So I think viewed on a spectrum, you have ancient Egyptian texts, and then I think the Book of Revelation is much closer, but still quite far. I do think Peugeot is a good person to bring up because indeed, as you change your worldview to a symbolic one, you can probably get a lot more out of this than you would if you're analyzing it, philosophically through modern philosophy lens. So I think it would be a shame to just decide, yeah, it's too far from us. There's nothing there for us to understand. But I think it would also be a bit naive to think that we are even able to get the full understanding as the ancients could have. But it's why I love the New Testament, because there are so many. Well, Jesus speaks a lot in parables. I think they are very powerful. But that's why I was thrown a bit with this one, because there were a lot of specifics in it where indeed, yeah, you're just a bit lost. And so,
Yeah, no, but I think even Peugeot admitted that he says like that the book of Revelation is the most difficult one because you have these passages in other parts of the Bible, but it's just like it's more contained. And this is just like it's too much. So like every new sentence there's like a new vision and something new added, and it's just like I was barely getting through sort of this one, and now there's just a new one, and it's so funny that also like the as I was listening to the Bio Project podcast, that they also like had spent hours like discussing. Oh yeah, okay, so this the context, this meaning, etc. Okay, so let's do a little bit of close reading, and that they were at least one of them was like, "This is what I'm talking about." Like we just spent hours talking about how to read this, and the moment you get to it, you're just like lost again.
Yeah.
Which is just so wild. But you do get some more like nonetheless, you get a little bit more insight, but never enough. But okay, so like I think there's some interesting passages. So I'll try to get to some specifics so we can zoom out and then get to maybe the resentment questions.
yeah.
But at any moment, feel free to interrupt or use the raise your hand function. But interrupt, that's
We just
also
want GP
totally
to
fine.
speak and not
Yeah,
stop
exactly.
speaking.
I want GP
I want
to
GP to
speak.
pour out the facts.
Yes, exactly. I want the Holy Spirit. It's almost Pentecost. Anyways,
Blasphemy.
cool. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I think it's relevant that after the seven churches, we get chapter 4, chapter 5, which is really talking about the Lamb, which I always said, the 24 who prostrate themselves, like bowing before Jesus. And I think the equivalency between the lion and the lamb is really interesting. It's really like this opposites, like opposites pulling each other. Also because like there's this vision obviously of the lion and the lamb, lying peacefully together, but Jesus is kind of both. So we can talk about that at the end. And this lamb that in chapter 5 that he has 7 horns and 7 eyes, which is really interesting, but also kind of disturbing if you think about it. So it's not necessarily this cute lamb. It's interesting that they like the new song in verse 9 of chapter 5, where it says, "Worthy are you to receive the book and to open its seals," because so the lamb is the one who is allowed to open the book, who is allowed to open the final and 7th seal. So that says something that there's something like a word which is being protected, which I find interesting. That it's like the logos are still so which is this is a Johannine concept, right? If there's a Johannine school, then this is central in the book of Revelation, and it's also central in the Gospel of John, where it's about the logos, and the logos is really extremely relevant. But there was no people weren't ready for it. But now we have the Lamb, and the Lamb is ready to open it. They say, "Worthy are you to receive the book and to open its seals, because you were slaughtered, and by your blood you made a purchase for God from every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and have made them into a kingdom and into priests for our God, and they will reign upon the earth." But I think that's interesting that there's this, like in Luke, you have a little bit less the what do you call it, the vision of atonement, that Jesus atoned for our sins, but this seems a little bit like it, like that he was a ransom for many, that by his blood, like he made a purchase for God. And I think that's something to keep in mind, that even though it's going to get very bloody, it says very explicitly that by his blood, by his self-sacrifice, this is happening. So it's just something to keep in mind, even though like there's going to be lots of destruction. But it starts off with the lamb himself being slain, and that sacrifice being relevant, which is also a distinction to sacrificing other people, sacrificing other animals, but the lamb sacrificing itself, which just, I think, well, I find fascinating. Then you get the seven seals, which become like progressively worse. That's generally speaking this way. The sixth one is always kind of like the worst one, because then at the seventh one is like a transition usually. A great earthquake when the sun became as black as hair sackcloth, and the moon became holy like blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth. So really intense. And then again, you get this transition before we talk about the seventh seal, and you get all these tribes of 12,000, 12,000 each. So that's as many people that are there. I'm interested in what it means that some people are written in the book of life, that are part of the Lamb, but other people are not. Like they start worshiping the beast. They have the mark on the wrist, on the arm, which is
Or
interesting because what?
the wrist or
The wrist or the
question.
forehead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good man.
So thinking or acting, so you have both those analogies, which is interesting. So like both in their this is really like Orwellian, right? So it's not just that they act
Yeah,
in a way
With
that is in
thoughts.
accordance with the bigger empire, but they also think alike. So like they're possessed, they're ideologically possessed by it, by the beast. So I think that's interesting, and therefore they are not in the book of life, whatever that means. Um, and the ones that are in the book of life, they go to the New Jerusalem in the end. Um, okay, so then like we continue, but then we have the seven horns. Again, very disturbing stuff. Let me just focus. Another mighty angel. Again, the number 42. Uh, yeah. And then we get in chapter 12, then I really find it becoming very interesting, because now you get some symbolism that is arguably a bit more pagan or more authentic. Like
Yeah.
it's at least less common in the Old Testament. So, for instance, this is 12, verse 1. A great sign was seen in heaven, a woman garbed with the sun and the moon beneath her feet, and on her head a chaplet of 12 stars.
Yeah.
And she was pregnant, and she cries out, enduring birth pangs, and in agony to give birth. Another sign was seen in heaven, and look, a great flame-hued dragon who had 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems, and his tail drags along 1/3 of the stars of heaven, and he cast them onto the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she should give birth, he might devour her child. So it's interesting that the potential for new life, which seems like the woman seems to be the good figure here, right? And the son seems to be okay, but like there's this dragon who will devour the son. So like really calls back to, the start of Exodus, the start of Matthew, in this very similar day, which I find interesting. As we're talking about the Satan, then we get 2 beasts who are not the same as the dragon, one from the earth and one from the sea. And I advise you to look at some of the beautiful William Blake paintings of these ones.
Oh, let's pull
Uh,
this up. Did you send them
do
to
you-
me?
Yeah, do you want to share them? Like
Yeah,
they're
I'll
in
just keep talking. I'll share them in between.
they're in a PDF file
Yeah, yeah. You're good. You're good.
that I sent in. Yeah. Um, and let me actually check what am I sort of forgetting? But obviously, like this is right before you have the main battle between all those figures. You have the Angel Michael, the Archangel Angel Michael being there playing his part, obviously. You have the Armageddon. So all of that is really fascinating. You have the Lamb's army. Um, and then eventually you get the fall of Babylon. We get the vision also of the whore of Babylon sitting on top of the beast, which according to Peugeot is this vision of like, somehow this completely liberal. Well, you can actually go to the one with the whore of Babylon. She's sitting on top of
Stop me.
the beast. It's fairly far. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one.
This one?
Yeah, yeah. And you see that from her cup, there's all this sort of these souls that are being destroyed. But then the beast, you can see if you go down a bit that he has 7 heads and is obviously destroying everything. And it's this vision of the beast is supposed to be a symbol for the totalitarian state, which makes sense in the Roman context, but also that being tied to Babylon. But then at the same time, that state supporting something like sexual licentiousness,
Yeah.
debauchery, etc. So obviously, like, yeah, I mean, I don't want to be controversial, but
Please.
some people make parallels, let's say, to our time, where we also have sex positivity, sexual freedom, but at the same time, like all of that, is happening against a background of slightly more, let's say, authoritarian aspects also creeping up.
Well-
If I can be a little bit cryptic about
Okay,
that.
never mind.
Well, well, no,
You're good. You're good. Let's not get you fired. from the universe.
and I'll just finish it up. Let's say,
Michael,
is my
he relocated.
hey relocated? Nice. He went to New Jerusalem, which is the final chapter. So like you have the final battle, which is also interesting. Like you have the sword from the mouth, which is
Wait,
also happening
is
at
there
the
a
start.
picture of the sword from the mouth?
No.
Okay.
But you can go to the final picture nonetheless of the slides.
Yeah.
Because eventually you get the New Jerusalem. No, not that one,
Oh,
but the one above.
This one.
And there's this new river of life, which is what we see, and we see the fruits. We see the trees of life bear fruit.
Oh, Michael.
Oh yes. Okay, so go ahead, Michael.
Oh no, finish what you were gonna say, Aaron.
Well,
I was just gonna make.
Okay. I'll just finish it very quickly, let's say. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
what's interesting about the New Jerusalem is that there will be no more need for a temple, and which helps us reflect on what is the temple or the church for us, right? Like it's the dwelling place of God. So it's like if you have, let's say, like again, they have like very useful visualizations on this, where it's like you have heaven and you have earth, and the place where they overlap, that's really where, let's say, the gospel or like the Bible stories are happening, and specifically spatially, that's where the temple is. And originally these two were together in the Garden of Eden, and then they were spread apart, like and there's like the whole Bible is about finding this mediation, and then it ends with this vision of the New Jerusalem where they're once again together, so there's no longer a need for a temple because
Yeah.
like you don't need this mating place with God because God is
God is
everywhere.
everywhere.
And we can talk about what that means, but I think that's the progression of the story.
Oh,
Yeah, I
I'd
mean,
to do
like, I
more
don't know
with
what to
that
make of
thought
it.
later. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to make kind of a general comment because we were talking earlier about is Book of Revelation, completely invented, or is it the result of kind of this prophetic download, this experience? And I'm glad you brought in William Blake because I've been able to study him both like on my own and also like part of a lecture series, a class. Like I have a copy of Paradise Lost with like he's done illustrations for Paradise Lost as well. And
GP is a
he's
big fan too.
Yeah, he's a super interesting person because like when he was like a young child, like 8 or 9 years old, he reports like going out into the wilderness and having images of like Mary and like angels and like I don't know the scholarship on like whether his poems or like his images, maybe GP will know more, are like specifically correlated with images, but it's like it's well documented that he had like these visions. And so yeah, like I think it does give some potentially some credibility to at least the possibility that Revelation was like I find it a little bit hard to believe that it was like a singular person's.
Yeah.
It just seems like so much had to happen for one person to experience all of that, but potentially a stitching together of multiple different
I kind of hope
images
that
from
more
multiple
because
people.
I'd be a bit worried if it was a singular thing. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but the human is fallible, right? What did you do, Aaron? Oh,
I wanted to also share.
yeah, you're good. Go ahead, share.
Okay, let me just check. So no, just keep talking. I
Okay.
just felt like that. I just in the meantime also
Can
wanted to show
someone
some
let
of
the
these.
Jeep out? Let him out.
Yes, let the Jeep out.
Unleash the beast.
into the new into the New Jerusalem.
Yes, where's the accuser?
The chariot, the Jeep chariot.
Okay, so what are we focusing on here?
No, I'm just showing some nice images. But
Okay.
what there was a discussion about William Blake, and I think the discussion was given the fact that he had similar, you know, mystical visions, that perhaps that speaks to the universality of it. Is that kind of like something you were speaking to, Michael, or not?
Yeah, just like just the possibility that the Book of Revelation was inspired or written um by through a mystical vision as well. And yeah, just thinking of um William Blake's, I think, kind of ability to enter, these like very symbolic, very challenge, like, Paradise Lost, similarly, people are like, I don't know what's happening.
Hmm.
It feels so symbolic, and like his ability to, I don't know, enter these worlds and like depict them and make sense of them. Um,
Yeah,
just
no,
yeah, just kind of
I
on
would
that
agree.
topic. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think that William Blake's a clear example of just a visionary, someone who can have visions and has visions quite regularly. And he wasn't particularly, well, he wasn't at all disturbed by the fact that he could have these visions, you know. It was just part of his normal experience. So yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. It's like I sometimes forget that modern people are kind of extremely shocked that even people could have visions without taking psychedelics, you know. But no, I think it's totally possible that this was all just a vision, um, with maybe some qualification around how much was sort of adjusted or kind of fleshed out afterwards, like Aaron pointed out. I would see it as probably being the work of one person, though, because it is extremely coherent, although drawn out, but it's quite coherent, and,
I
and
agree.
so
No.
yeah, I'd see it as being the work of one person.
I think maybe we
So,
should. Sorry, Michael, go.
I was just gonna say quickly. So, if we take it as the vision of one person, then what do we make of the words of Jesus in the context of the book? Like, is that something Jesus really said? Is that something this person had a vision of Jesus saying? Um, how how do we make sense of that?
Or maybe this is exactly right. Like it's the vision that someone had of what Jesus said. Um, Obviously, the question, did Jesus actually say it, has some metaphysical presuppositions that are going to vary
Mm,
depending on if you're a
hmm
Christian and what kind of Christian you are. Um, Personally, I would see it as probably being, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty open to the fact that maybe in some sense this really was Jesus' words, but I think that even you could ask that question about the Gospels themselves, which is to say that first of all, they're not Jesus' words, like literally and indisputably, because he probably wasn't preaching in Greek, right? So even if it's just an issue of translation, that's still an issue. That changes the meaning of things. And then if you're talking about how they were
I
received
do
by a
know, by the way,
particular
some people
individual.
argue this. Some people think he he did preach in Greek, but I think that's unlikely too. But anyways, it's just
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, and maybe he did to like those areas of the Holy Land that actually were with more Greek speakers or non-Jews or something like that. Who knows? But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but I think generally, right, this the consensus is he probably was only fluent in Aramaic. So, um, but I did actually listen to one of the Bible Project podcasts you sent me, Aaron, the first one you sent me, where they were talking about the tension or the interesting way that the parable plays off two kinds of new. Like there's two versions of new in Greek. One means like new in time, and one means new in quality. And so the parable of like the old wine, is it old wine in new wineskins or vice versa?
Hmm.
New
hmm
wine in old
hmm
wineskins because you don't want to
Yeah.
burst the skins.
Yeah.
That Jesus uses these two different words in like this really interesting way, or this really like kind of wise and intelligent way, clever way. And then he goes on to say, like, isn't Jesus clever in how he uses Greek? Like, isn't he wonderful? And well, he didn't say Greek, but in how he
Yeah.
uses these words. But then I'm thinking, but he probably didn't preach this in Greek, so he probably wasn't using those words. And I don't know if they have a similar thing in Aramaic or not. Maybe they do. But anyway,
Yeah.
that was a side note. So yeah, I
Mm.
think coming back to your question, Michael, I mean, if someone hears the words of someone else, just generally, I think they always interpret them through their own psychology. And I think the Jesus of Revelation is the one that speaks at the beginning of Revelation is similar. I don't even know if I'd say very similar, but certainly similar to the Gospels, the Jesus of the Gospels. But he's different as well. Like there's a rigor and a
Yeah.
demandingness, I think,
Yeah.
in the Jesus of Revelation as well.
Yeah. Yeah, especially the way he talks to the seven churches. Like that was like something very striking to me. It was like, like basically just calling all of them out and being like, you're either sexually immoral or you're eating sacrificial meat or you're honoring Jezebel or whatever it
Hmm.
might be. Um, which is very like strikingly different to, the Jesus with the Samaritan woman or,
Yeah.
a lot of the Jesus that you see through the Gospels. It has a similar, I think someone brought up like the visions of the Old Testament. Like it kind of has a similar tone to the God of the Old Testament in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Um, which I don't know, maybe that strengthens the argument that it's it's Jesus through the
Hmm.
interpretive lens of this person.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it's difficult because we can't. Uh, okay, so we might differ on this, but I think that there is something to be said for the fact that Paul's vision that he had on the road to Damascus was authentic, that it wasn't merely psychological, that something else was going on there. Um, so I don't just want to say that all visions of Jesus, let's say, were uh, wrong,
Mm,
and then obviously also like that it's been included in scripture, which probably makes someone biased to think like, okay, then maybe there's something authentic here too. But it does seem so specific nonetheless. But I am open to, let's say, like there's something about the Gospels too. First of all, that because all the Gospel authors present a slightly different Jesus, which is relevant, you get a somewhat overlapping picture, but nonetheless, I think it's slightly different. So I think that's relevant that we don't get this one Jesus from the gospel. I think we get multiple impressions of him. Like we listen to four people tell his story or what they heard from other people. And then you have the vision, and then I'm also open to the fact that that in the gospels Jesus is saying like not yet, now is not yet the time. So that there's something about something progressing through time, and that perhaps what's happening at the end of the first century called for a different part of his character. Which, by the way, like it's not like Jesus wasn't apocalyptic. Like he had very apocalyptic episodes, and there's obviously that line in the Gospel of Matthew where he says, "I came not to bring peace, but to bring sword to bring a sword." So it's not entirely different from it, but still, it's just so much. It's not just so, yeah, I don't know. Those are just some thoughts. Yeah, God.
That boy
Um,
was fluent in every language.
mhm.
Jesus,
Yeah,
for
he was
sure.
all knowing.
He put ears on people. Come on. I think he probably knew Greek. I was just thinking about this the last couple of minutes. I'm always thrown. I mean, it's so hard to be a Christian to believe that there's a Son of God. Had the same basic infrastructure as we do in our bodies and in in our speech, and it's it the whole of Christianity throws me. First conversation with GP was about death. I don't know if GP remembers this. You talk about just life after death and stuff like that, and it all of it goes against my intuitions, the specificity of things, the fact that it was a man who spoke Aramaic and that it happened in history. It all goes against what I want what makes sense to me in an intuitive level.
Mm.
And now I've just through these conversations I have to contest with the fact that Christianity is not purely metaphysical or mystical or spiritual, or it's also like flesh and blood and people and bones and just the specific. And I find it so hard to place.
Mhm.
I find the God that's not mystical really hard to understand, but at the same time I've never felt such a proximity to the divine as I have uh, in trying to connect to the figure of Christ.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's a good point. Like I I was thinking about that as well, reading this, and I don't have a very large understanding of Islam, but like, Muslims read the Quran as like the undisputed like word of God that has
Yeah.
literally descended from heaven, and
Yeah. So the
there's
divine dictation, not divine inspiration, but divine
yes,
dictation, right? Yeah.
yes, yes. And so like when you read the I'm just struck through this conversation that there probably isn't ever a debate between Muslims about like who wrote the book of Revelation and like how it was written and like was it written from a prophetic vision or was it invented or all these other books where it's kind of gray who the author is, and even just the reality that like you know there's books that are written by just human followers of God, right, as opposed to kind of God himself. Um, that
Yeah.
that makes it both like this wrestling, like Israel, like we who wrestle with God and trying to make sense of and maybe quarrel or be frustrated by um some of these authors or their their viewpoints or their stances on certain things, um but that also creates an intimacy and a closeness because there is this relatability,
Yeah.
um and this dual presence of human and God. So you don't lose the spiritual essence and that spiritual element, because if you lose that then it kind of would just read like any other novel that we would read.
Yeah.
But that the fact that that is still alive with the flesh and blood makes it, um it's that union that
Yeah.
I think we're all after. But yeah, that was just
Hmm.
striking, that kind of
Yeah.
contrast between faiths.
Mm.
Yeah. I think it was even mentioned in the chapter, right? Like that it was used as an inspiration, the Book of Revelation for certain Islamic extremists, which is
Mm.
yeah,
Hmm.
interesting. Yeah, so I think maybe we should touch upon some of the subject matters that were introduced at the start. Um, like some of them we already discussed, but perhaps we
Resentment.
could talk about this being whether or not it's resentful and about the final vision of heaven and what that means. I know that GP has like spent like maybe 7 videos on this topic at this point on this channel. So like I know that he has some things to say about that. Um, so maybe let's start off with the intuition whether the book of Revelation is fundamentally resentful or not. Like, you know, what are your thoughts?
So, so yeah, I mean, I'll start by emphasizing sort of the positive perspective, and then sort of get into why why I do think it's conditioned by resentment. I mean, the positive perspective would be that actually, I mean, just the first. So one way to think about it would just be that the holy manifests in a tremendous way, right? The holy to human consciousness appears as being overpowering and destructive a lot of the time, and that's consistent throughout the whole Bible pretty much, especially the Old Testament, and is consistent throughout world mythology and so forth. So, and again, I think as you know, myself personally, and as modern people generally, I think we don't have much of a sense of what the holy actually means, and so we just don't have a connection with that sort of phenomenon. Like God would be accompanied by thunder and lightning, and maybe by earthquakes, and maybe by lots of people dying, right? Like that doesn't sort of strike us as being as making much sense, but it's just obvious to I think a lot of ancient people, because God is just an incredible amount of power. There's a wonderful, I can't remember the right verse, but there's a wonderful image towards the end of the book of Revelation where God appears on his throne in the world, and the heavens and earth flee away, and there's nowhere to hide them, or they find no place to go.
Yeah.
Which is the most extreme manifestation of that tendency, I think, which is just that the whole heavens and earth have to flee the presence of God because of his holiness. And so I think that part of all this sort of apocalyptic imagery is a manifestation of thinking about the holy, or having an apprehension of the holy. And I think in particular, it's also like the holy as against the base and the sinful, right? I'm sorry, Aaron, you wanted to interject here.
Feel free to finish your point, but I just wanted to signal that
Okay.
I have something to say
Okay.
about something. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so I think also it's particularly to do with if you sin against the holy, like this is the consequence sort of thing. Consequences is not the right word, because it sort of like implies a natural response. But this is what happens when you sin against the holy, is like you will be met with overwhelming destructive power. To me, it's not occurring on the level of morality. And so when we bring sort of moral judgments on this kind of phenomenon, we're missing the point. The point is that what's absolutely holy, what's absolutely sacred, it should never be trifled with, and should never be disobeyed, and you should submit to it absolutely. And again, this is present in all religion. It's present in mythology. And so I think, again, this is where a lot of people might struggle with Revelation, because it's basically saying that if you disobey God, and to a certain extent, I think it's just saying if you're a natural creature that hasn't sort of somehow kind of connected with God through his mediator, and found forgiveness for just being a natural creature, you will be destroyed by God. You will be tormented by God for your sinfulness. So again, this is the positive point. This isn't the negative point. So this is me saying that this is just sort of part of the phenomenology of it. And then briefly, Aaron, I'll just mention the negative, because I mean, I think a lot of it's self-explanatory. Like, I think you just need to read the book start to finish, and you can just see that there's a tremendous amount of vengeance here, and a tremendous desire for vengeance. Like the souls of the saints ask for it, and they celebrate it. Like it's not like they pray for their enemies. It's not like they say, God forgive them, for they know not what they do. They actually ask for it, and they celebrate it when it happens. And so you can see that, and it's so drawn out. Like there's so many episodes, there's so many instances of vengeance. It's not just like God comes and shatters the earth, or God comes and wipes it out with fire or something like that. But it's this prolonged, drawn out thing. And especially like part of it, especially spending a lot of time talking about Rome, essentially, right, with the whore of Babylon and so forth, and how she'll be destroyed, and she'll be dishonored, and she'll be brought low, and everyone's singing and celebrating that. It speaks to me to like a psychology of someone who feels oppressed, and who feels dishonored, and who has had no honor and no power in this life because of the authorities, because of those in earthly power, and he wants revenge, and he wants God to come in and vindicate him, and all the people, in his group, in his sect, and humiliate his opponents. Not only humiliate them, but torture them forever. So that's the negative part. That's the resentful part. So for me, I think there's probably a combination of both going on here. There's a sense for the holy, and there's a sense of, I'll finally show them that I was actually in the right, and that God was on my side, and I'll
I'll torment them for the suffering that they've caused me. So that's it. Aaron, go ahead.
Um, yeah, no, thanks. I more or less sort of agree. Like I just think it's very difficult to have a very strong opinion on the Book of Revelation because just like it's so nuanced. So basically, I agree with all the statements that are made about the Book of Revelation, except for maybe, like the sense that, oh, it's specifically about our time and about no other time. Um, so I, generally speaking, agree with everything that's been said, and I think that's really, yeah, worthwhile and interesting to consider both those aspects. That there's something about the naturalness, indeed. That's also how I often read statements by the Old Testament God. It's not so much, it's like he's saying, follow my way, and then people say no, and then he says, well, have it your way then, like that's often how the Old Testament goes, and then destruction happens, and that's then the wrath of God, which is like the people, the way of the people is the wrath of God, is basically the same. So if people follow God, they don't experience his wrath. And I think something similar is definitely happening here. There are some points that maybe complicate it slightly. Before I get into that, I just wanted to talk about like indeed like the epicness of like that final, like where heaven and earth sort of fall away for the glory of God. That seems to be also like I think I heard Peugeot speaking to this. There's this undoing of creation, so it really becomes full circle. Like if you go back to Genesis, that's obviously like God created the heavens and the earth. Um, I think that's just interesting to compare it, right? Like that there's that this being placed at the end of the Bible, it is really beautiful how sort of, it's the creation of earth and then also the complete sort of cessation for it to create this new Jerusalem. Because it's not just earth, it's also heaven, right? It's like heaven and earth, which both sort of fall away. So I think that's interesting to ponder on. Then as for the vengeful aspect, I sort of agree, um, in the sense that it's definitely full of resentment towards Rome. I think that's just clear. But at the same time, it is relevant that there is this new ethic, and part of that is visible in, um, for instance, Revelation 12. Yeah, chapter. Oh no, Revelations chapter 12, and then verse 10 and 11. Um, Then it says, I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now has come about the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of Christ or his anointed, because the prosecutor of our brothers, the one prosecuting them before our God day and night, has been cast down. And they conquered him by the blood of the suckling lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their own soul all the way to death. Yeah, and then the slander has descended into you with a great rage, which is similar to what we read in Luke, right? Like I see Satan fall down like lightning, knowing that he has little time. So it's like a desperate part. But I think the relevant verse there is verse 11. They conquered him by the blood of the suckling lamb. And that is a constant theme. So I think it's slightly earlier, where it's like, when will you avenge sort of, yeah, so like this is chapter, what is it? Chapter 6, verse 10. They were crying out in a loud voice, saying, how long, O Master, the holy and the true, will you judge and exact justice for our blood from those who dwell upon the earth? And there's perhaps this sense that this new kind of conquering is happening through self-sacrifice of sorts. It's underdeveloped because obviously people die. Like there's many well, it's just very clear. It's like, like millions of people die, and a third of the earth's population is fading away, but at the same time that's happening through the blood of the lamb. You know what I mean? So it's not like the lamb started slaying other people and then he drew their blood. It's like, no, through his blood he conquered them. So that says something about, yeah, this is still the gospel message, where it's like, yeah, no, we're not gonna attack Rome by literally attacking it. We're gonna attack Rome by them crucifying us, which is just like strange. That's how we conquer Rome. So like there's still something in there which is different, I'd say, at least. But anyways, Michael.
Well, it's also interesting in the light of that phrase how essentially the future fate of Israel is kind of foretold because like while there's still bloodshed happening, he's saying we've already conquered Rome.
Mm.
And I imagine that must have been hard for the people and the families affected to wrap their heads around because they're what they're experiencing is far from, conquering Rome. But I just think that's like, I mean, there's so much to unpack there, which I think you unpacked most of it. But I think it's also just interesting, and it feels like important to note that he's using the past tense to refer to something that hasn't yet happened. And so I think it also goes to further the um, kind of I will return again kind of narrative, and how time, I think that's another interesting theme of Revelation is like the theme of time. Like there's the sense at the end that Jesus will come again in some like Chronos time future, right? But there's also the sense that through the Lamb's blood and the indwelling of the Spirit, he has already, in his ascension to heaven, he has made himself present to to everyone. So there's like this circularity of time notion that like he is here always, and he always has been actually.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. I think there's definitely like that. That's also like the cosmic aspect of it, which is also what's I think just it's just been realized that like especially like we're reading it in order now, right? Like so the New Testament supposedly like this could be a correct order. So we've definitely arrived at the point where there's debate among the fact, like we've read the Pauline letters where they say like, oh, Jesus was present for the creation of the earth, etc. So there's definitely this insight that in some sense this has all been fulfilled already, like a long time ago. So I I I in some sense agree with you that that's like a plausible reading, that it's not merely sort of about oh, now all of a sudden, like Jesus sort of became this, but that they realized, like, wait, this must logically happen because what's taking place in Rome, and just like you have to imagine the shock. I think we really underestimate it of, which is why indeed, like maybe the um the similarity with Gaza could be relevant, but just like the shock of the Jerusalem temple being destroyed and sort of what like like that was like this is the main big thing, like by this big empire. And like, okay, yeah, now obviously, like what Jesus will do now is like this must be of a different nature than let's say uh when he was still alive, like preaching, etc. So yeah, I don't know. I can somewhat get behind it, but again, this is sort of me reading charitably too, I think. Um, it is tough. I'm not going to pretend like it's not tough. It's also 10, and we haven't talked about the final thing, like the final a new heaven and a new earth. What is it? And Michael, you mentioned that you were thinking about it a lot, about the second coming, etc. Um, about the New Jerusalem. I think we want to wrap up, so maybe we should end with chapter 21 and 22. We can also read it, but maybe we want to have some comments about it first. Do you want to speak to it, Michael?
I just don't really know what to do with it. I yeah, like I think it's hard to describe because it's like on one hand it's like a cornerstone of, I think, everyone who's a Christian, like their faith, that belief that one day all pain and suffering will be alleviated, and that that just seems like such a bedrock for the theological virtue of hope, right? Um, but on the other hand, like I can see how it can become this like naive, blind kind of just kind of like throwing away all sense of responsibility in the here and now because like one day Jesus will return and all will be made well. And like the potential tragedy of like never getting to experience that in your human lifetime, even though like faith is obviously extends beyond all of us and is like eternal. Yeah, I just don't really know what to do with it, what to make of it. And I'm curious how all of you work with that.
Any thoughts from you, Lucas, before GP certainly has thoughts on it?
Well, there's some things about faith that I see and I hear and I find it hard to understand, and I still accept them. I accept that I don't have the understanding, but I also don't shove them away. So I keep thinking, I keep being present with them. I think that's the right thing to do with mysteries and things that go beyond your understanding, but that you do have an intuition about being important and true in some level. So that's kind of the stance I've been taking with it. But yeah, I'm really open to having some of that mystery being unraveled or revealed to me in some way.
So for me, yeah, this this is something have spent a bit of time on my channel. Talking about this notion of the afterlife, and so here's where we sort of see it in its kind of final form in the Bible, at least. And so we'll just put the lake of fire to one side for now, and and all the issues involved in that, and we'll take what I think a lot of people would consider to be the more, in a certain sense, easy part, which is the New Jerusalem. Easy in the sense of that this seems good and they want it. Not necessarily easy in how do we imagine this? That's a different question, and I think that's what you guys are struggling with a little bit. But for me, when I read this, I feel like, and I'm being quite sincere, I don't even want it. I don't want it. It's not talking to me about life. Life has got chaos and suffering, and this vision does not have either of those things. The sea is no more. There's no more darkness. Death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain, for the former things have passed away. Now, Aaron and I have debated this a little bit, and I could be wrong. I definitely could be wrong.
We're still
But
friends.
we're still friends. But I don't think that you can actually separate out the good things of life from the bad. I think that they're interdependent and inextricably interwoven. That's my deep intuition, and that's my conclusion after kind of thinking about these things.
Like shadow and
And I
light
think
and warmth and cold, right? The kind of like,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Everything is intertwined in that sense. So that when we're talking about life, when we're talking about real existence as opposed to mere abstraction, we're actually talking about a whole that includes all of those things. And I think that if you reflect on your experience at any given moment, even when you're the most happy, you actually find that there's either actually suffering there, there's some sort of desire, some sort of need, or at the very least, there's a sense of comparison with what suffering would be, or a time that you have suffered, or that suffering you've escaped. It's all there, and so I don't think we ever experience what we're kind of looking forward to here. I think that it's an abstraction. It doesn't, luckily, thank God, I live a good life, like in the sense that I have a happy life. And so I don't feel the need to sort of reach out for this abstraction. And I can totally understand, and I don't mean this in a condescending way at all, but I can totally understand if someone's had a miserable life and been persecuted, that they would reach out for this abstraction. Um, it's also quite a negative abstraction as well, right? Like it's not, we don't have the kind of positive vision of the houris in paradise that you get with, with the Islamic paradise. It's not talking about positive sensual pleasures. It's talking about the absence of suffering, the absence of pain, the absence of chaos. The positive part is to do with light, to do with light and presence of God. And that part I grant. Like, I think that's the positive aspect of this, is that it's talking about a mystical closeness with God. And so I think that's something that clearly animates the author as well. So I'm not taking the Nietzschean approach and saying it's just resentment at all. But I think that the other aspects of it are very negative, and they're coming from a soul that's trying to escape suffering and hardship, and find relief. And so that just doesn't resonate with me. And fundamentally, I want life, like I want life in its fullness. That kind of yeah, it could be described as the Dionysian way or the Nietzschean way of seeing it. I don't want that absolutely. Like, I'm not saying I can affirm everything, but that's the general orientation that I take. So for me, yeah, these passages are very
Triggering.
well, yeah, I disagree with him, basically.
I
Yeah.
just love that. That was amazing.
Yeah, me too.
And
Yeah.
I always think of like, like it's such an intense book. And then it ends, like, obviously it's in verse 18 of 22, like, if anyone takes away from this prophecy's book, God will take away a share from the tree of life, from the holy city they are written about in this book. So it's like, don't doubt it. But, which is just, I don't know. That's a different, so I'll say a few things about that, and maybe then we could like wrap up. Then we'll like do like one final round. I'll share a few things. I'll read out loud, let's say, what I find is beautiful and relevant, which is indeed like the first few verses of 21 and the first few verses of 22. I'll leave out the more controversial parts. And then perhaps we could do like one final round of reflections and take home messages, if at all, because it's a difficult book. So I think I somewhat agree. Like, I mean, like I've expressed my disagreement with GP about this issue specifically before. Not so much because I strongly believe in I don't know, this heavenly realm to come, but just because I'm more agnostic about it, and I don't really share the discomfort that GP is feeling about it. There's a few other things that I tend to think, and maybe this is blasphemous, but I tend to find it consistent that if you think that some of the descriptions of what will happen are a bit extreme, maybe hyperbolic, I dare say, so like all the previous 20 chapters, then perhaps some of the descriptions of what will happen at the end are also a bit hyperbolic. And then perhaps, like there will be no more tears. Like I will wipe away every tears from their eyes. Like there will be no more crying. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure. In that sense, I agree with GP. Like perhaps that is a more metaphorical way and logical way, like all the previous 20 chapters were, to talk about at least a better life to come, but not this life that is completely rid of every form of suffering. Because indeed, suffering can be good of a beautiful life, and in that sense, I believe in a Christ who doesn't do away with suffering, but who transforms suffering, who fulfills it, and who creates this sense of fulfillment in it, and that's what I sort of, in my best moments, I find that to be true. That if I suffer truly, let's say, for these convictions, that I notice they are transformed into something beautiful and good. But I can also suffer meaninglessly, and it's ugly, and I'm not sure if that's part of the life to come. And I think that's where my disagreement with GP lies, and something that we'll have many more conversations about. Feel free to respond to this in the final part, but nonetheless, I think there's something to be said also that there's this beautiful vision of indeed heaven and earth coinciding, them falling apart, God trying to find his mediation, and them being together again. Even that perhaps won't literally be what is written down here, because I don't believe the previous chapters will literally be what will occur before it. So, but anyways, maybe now I won't be getting anything from the Tree of Life now that I've taken away from this book. Okay,
Thank you, Aaron.
can I read? Is that okay? And
Yeah,
then
but
I'll-
I'm a bit over time, so can we wrap up in a
Okay,
short
sure.
second? Thank you.
But it's brief, right?
Yeah,
It's just
sure.
chapter 21. This is David Bentley Hart translation. And I saw a new sky and a new earth. For the first sky and the first earth have passed away, and the sea no longer is. And I saw the holy city, a new Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, made ready like a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Look, the tabernacle of God is with human beings, and he will tabernacle with them, and they will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them as their God. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and no longer will there be death, no longer will there be sorrow or lamentation or pain, for the first things have passed away. And the one who sat upon the throne said, Look, I made all things new. And he said, Write, because these words are trustworthy and true. And he said, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And then it's controversial stuff, so I'll skip to 22, verse 1. And he showed me a river of life's water, bright as crystal, coming forth from the throne of God and the suckling lamb. In the middle of her street and on either side of the river was a tree producing 12 harvests of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. And the leaves of the tree are for a healing of the Gentiles. And no longer will there be anything accursed. And the throne of God and the suckling lamb will be therein, and his slaves will worship him. And they will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. And there will be no more night. They have no need of lantern light and sunlight, because the Lord God will shine upon them, and they will reign unto the ages of the ages. Okay, those were my final reflections and thoughts. I enjoyed it very much, and I'm looking forward to hopefully discussing the rest of the Johanna Corpus in perhaps 2 weeks. Would be nice.
Thank you, Aaron. I completely agree. It was amazing. I'm happy we got to have a productive and helpful to me for sure conversation with the text that's so complicated and overwhelming in many ways. I appreciated all of your contributions and these final reflections from yourself and GP. I'll listen to again, because I thought that sounds like a basis for a very fruitful conversation. Michael.
Yeah, I just echo what Lucas said. I found it very clarifying, inspiring, also like any good dialogue, healthy tension. And I can see myself with a foot in both GP and Aaron's corner on that last point. I've something that came up as a pondering for me, and something that I've thought about before, is like in the New Jerusalem, in wiping away all the tears, removing all the pain and suffering, do we still need God in the New Jerusalem? Do we still need faith if there is no more suffering? Because I tend to agree with Aaron that God doesn't just take away suffering; He transforms it, and gives us the strength and the courage to bear it, and to actually come out, not just surviving, but better for it. And without that, without the presence of that, do we still need God? That's kind of something that I'm curious about. But yeah, no, really grateful for this, as always.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this discussion as well, and all your different viewpoints as well, and all your kind of conscious out loud kind of wrestlings and questionings as well. That's been really good. I'll just very, very briefly round it off with a positive interpretation of Revelation. That would be my interpretation is too strong a word, but my reading of it. So I don't think this was either the intention of the author or the understanding of the early readers, but I would give it a Blakean kind of reading, which would be to say that none of this concerns the afterlife at all, and that it concerns a different way of seeing this life and this world right now. Which is to say that the vision of the new heaven and the new earth, the vision of the new Jerusalem, is to see the glory of God and the holiness that's manifested in creation at its fullness at all times, in the bad, in the good, in the suffering, in the happiness, in every creature, in every manifestation, right? And that would be my life, what I would call like a life affirming positive reading, which doesn't take away anything from life, but adds the glory and adds the holiness of God to it, or adds just holiness itself, the ground of being. And so it's a different way of seeing, basically. And it goes to this quote from Blake, which is a famous quote from The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. And so with that, I'll end.
Okay, I'll stop it there, guys. That's perfect. I wish you have a good day, night, and we'll talk about the next one. See you.
Yes. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. See you. Bye.
Okay, what are you still doing here? What are you doing here, Jason? Jason Schweitzer, what are you doing listening to a voice and a black screen? Are you questioning your sanity yet, Jason? Are you wondering, have I made mistakes in my life to end up in this live stream with 2 viewers? Are you even sure that you're listening to a YouTube stream right now? Maybe these voices are inside of your skull, your head. Jason, you must repent, my friend. Darkness, blackness and darkness forever. I've got an auto translation on. My brothers, there's only brothers listening right now. I wish you a blessed day. I need to talk to you all. We need to convene. We need to form a fellowship of the Ring of Swords, which is what I'm reading right now. Jason, I'm just wondering what kind of creature you would be. I think I would definitely be an elf. And I'm afraid, my friend, you would be Frodo. Alright, say when. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, see you people. Bye.